So Akuratyde,
Yeah.
wait,
Oh, you said
hang
it
on,
right.
I'm saying that correctly, right?
Yeah, you're like the first
All right.
person I've met, I think that said it right.
How do people usually say it?
Oh man, I've gotten, everything. It's usually they say Akuratyde, or I've gotten like Akuratyde, like just all over the place. Like I've gotten the random shit. I think there was one other guy that I ran into that said it right. I ran into a guy at Respect. It was the only time I've ever been recognized. He came up to me and he was like, "Hey, are you Akuratyde?" And I was like, "I am." That was kind of cool.
Sick. And you
So.
got your name right.
Yeah, and he got it right. That was the only other time that anyone's got it right. But yeah, typically it's Acura-tide, like, Acura the car. And I'm like, no, but it's close enough. I don't usually correct people.
Well, for all who are watching and listening, it's Akuratyde. I am so excited to be having this chat with you. And I just wanted to let you know, I have to say that Blue Martin mix was my most listened to mix of 2020. Is not from 2020. It's from 2015, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, I could not stop listening throughout 2020, and I'm pretty sure I made sure most of my friends heard it as well.
I
So
really
thank you
appreciate
for
that.
that.
Thank you.
Among all the other amazing things, I could spend this whole time fangirling, frankly, but my intention is for you to do most of the talking here. So you have so much going on. You have the label, you have
Yep.
some sick collabs, you're doing a ton of incredible artwork. I'm loving your videos, loving them. Maybe from here, if it's okay with you, we can just jump into talking about your label, Modern Conveniences. You have some
Sure.
incredible artists on there. So maybe just as a starting point for those who aren't familiar, just a brief overview of Modern Conveniences, the label.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it mostly focuses on kind of the like deeper side of drum and bass, what is commonly referred to as autonomic. It's kind of, like a lot of halftime, a lot of minimal. I try to stick with releases that are a little bit more melodic though, because the direction that a lot of the halftime minimal stuff's gone in the last few years is like really super dark. And don't get me wrong, I like that stuff. I write that stuff under my Vex 7 alias, but I felt that there was maybe an opportunity because I was noticing that there weren't a lot of people putting out the type of autonomic that I like, which is the like really melodic stuff. Oftentimes it has like a lot of influence from 80s music, whether it's, like old John Carpenter movies or like Tangerine Dream, but real synth based stuff, synthesizer based stuff. And I love that stuff, especially like instrumental, Kid Drama, D-Bridge, all those guys. They kind of set the foundation for that sound. And I felt like, it was just moving away gradually over the last 5 years, maybe moving away from that style. And I wanted to see if, there's a place to still have that more melodic side of the music. That was the intent when I started the label. I was like, I want to release a lot of melodic stuff from artists that I like and people that I'm friends with. And, some of them aren't people that I really know very well, but I just really respect their music. And I wanted to see if I could get them on board. And almost everybody that I've asked, believe it or not, was on board. There's only a few people that have kind of been like, oh, I'm not sure, But yeah, pretty much everybody that was like, hey, would you want to do an EP for the label? They were like, yeah, definitely, man. People seemed really excited when I was, starting it up. Um, so that's, kind of the sound. We've got a couple releases coming out that are a little like darker and moodier just because I do like that stuff too. And it's good to switch it up. I want to keep people on their toes. I don't want to just always be like releasing the same kind of thing. But with Modern Conveniences, I want it to be kind of open to anybody. And, but I want to have maybe some of the same people come through a few times. So for example, we did a, or I did, I don't know, I always say we, but it's really just me. Um, but we did a Eusebia release, the Recall EP, back in I think it was October, and then I've already got another one for him slated in June of this year.
Amazing. Can you expand on what you've been up to, of course, that you can share at this point?
My second solo album is finished, and that will be coming out on Blue Martin, just like my first one, and I'm really excited about that. It's called Home Movies.
You said home movies.
Yeah, Home Movies. It's like a bit moodier than my first album. Like my first album was really melancholy because it was about kind of like I'm sure you've probably heard this story. I don't know if you've read any interviews I did around that time, but it was about four people that I lost in my life kind of in a short span of time. And so it was about just kind of like dealing with the loss of losing those loved ones, and just the process of grieving and channeling like a lot of that emotion into music, kind of really helped me deal with it. So for this one, I wanted to do something a little different. So I went a little bit more like introspective, and I was thinking about, my childhood and just growing up. And I like albums that have, like, the titles have double meanings. So for me, Past Lives has a double meaning because it's like, you know, literally like lives that have been gone or lost. But also, I've just gone through a lot of changes in my life personally. And so my wife and I have together. Sometimes we're like reminiscing and we're like, oh, remember this thing like that happened 15 years ago, and it almost doesn't even feel like me. It feels like somebody else's life, because it's just like so far removed from where I am now. And so I think of those as, I kind of joke that those are past lives, where it's like, oh, that's one of my past lives that I've lived. It doesn't really feel like it happened to me. It was so long ago, and I'm just in such a different place. So for home movies, it's kind of like literal in one sense, where it's thinking about like, childhood, innocence, capturing that in like a moment of time. And then it's also a commentary on the way that everything's just, filmed these days. Like everybody just, as soon as something happens, they're like getting out their phones, and it just goes up on YouTube, and it's like everything's being documented. So it's a kind of a commentary on like technology and the way that we now, document our lives. And I don't mean to say that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just interesting, because when I was a kid growing up, like if we were going to record something, you had to get the big like movie camera that went over your shoulder, and you can like make your own little home movies that way. And now, it's just simple as pulling out a phone. There's a song on the album called Modern Conveniences, and I purposely wanted to do that to kind of like tie it to the label, because thematically they have the same theme, which is the name is a commentary on technology too, modern technology, and the way that we take it for granted. Because I think we do take it for granted a lot. There's a lot of people out there that, have like these incredible devices, from whatever it may be, Xbox, PlayStation, or a Mac or a phone or whatever. I'm a little older. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 40. And it's like these things are so incredible, and even I take them for granted, but I kind of like to stop and remind myself sometimes, like this, some of these, devices that we have in our lives are pretty amazing, and they can do pretty amazing things. And especially, I don't want to say like if you use them the right way, because that implies that there's a right way to use them. But if you're using them maybe in like a really creative way, or in an altruistic way, for example, you can do some really amazing things with this technology. So that's sort of what the meaning is behind the name Modern Conveniences.
Well, thank you for that. That is definitely, I mean, you already hit on one of the questions that I was particularly interested to know, which is the story behind the name Modern Conveniences, and what inspired that. So how did that come about? Had you been thinking you wanted to start a label for a while?
I had it in the back of my mind for kind of a while, but what really kicked it off was I do graphic design for a living, and so I also do website design. And so I'd gotten in touch with Kid Drama about helping him out with some website work, because he needed somebody to do his website. And I ended up doing the whole thing. At first, it was just going to be like, oh, I'll kind of help out a little bit. But as the project grew bigger, it was sort of like, oh, it'd be easier if I just did the whole thing. And he was like, cool. And he was like, "Do you want to do a remix trade? Like, I'll do a remix for you, and you do my website." And I was like, "Yeah, that's perfect. I would love to do that." And then I kind of did the same thing with Random Movement for his website for Flight Pattern. So then I had these two remixes, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with these two remixes? And I showed them to Chris from Blue Martin, and he was like, "Yeah, they're cool. I like them, but I don't really know like what we'd do with them, because we don't usually release like remix singles. So it's kind of like where would they fit?" He was like, we could maybe throw them on like a future release as a bonus track or something. But at the time, I didn't really have anything else written like for Akuratyde. So I was like, well, I don't know what they would go on either then. So they kind of just sat on my hard drive for a while. I think for like a year they sat on my hard drive, and I was just like, I don't know what to do with these. And then eventually I started talking to some other people, and I was like, yeah, I've got these cool remixes that are just sitting on my hard drive. And those other people expressed interest too. They were like, well, I want to do a remix. Like, I would do one for you. It was like Silent Dust, Jaskin and Uneven, and 3VS, the group that I'm in with Monica and Tellis. We kind of, just the more people I talked to, the more people became interested, and they were like, I would love to try my hand at one. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I just started sending stems out to all these people, and I got all these remixes back. And then I was like, well, all right, I definitely have to do something now. I have like 8 remixes, which, ended up being redesigned volume 1 and 2. So once I had them all, then I was like, all right, I need to figure out a way to start a label. And so I talked to Chris from Blue Martin, because I figured he would be the best person to talk to about setting up a label. And he actually really helped me a lot. He was very helpful and kind of pointed me in the right direction. He actually hooked me up with their distributor, which was really cool because they don't just let anybody join. You typically have to be a little bit more well known than I am to join, but he kind of put in a good word for me, and they hooked me up. So that was really cool. So once I had distribution, then I was like, all right, now I can really do this. So from that point, it was just kind of figuring out like what I wanted the visual aesthetic of the label to be, because I wanted something that would really stand out and not just be like, oh, this is just looks like any other label. I want it to be like you look at it and you immediately know that's Monochrome Muses. So once I had like the visual aesthetic together, and I had reached out to a few people and had them like get on board with doing EPs, then yeah, I was ready to launch. So it was actually going to launch much earlier, but the pandemic just really kind of messed everything up. My plan originally was to launch in March of last year. So I had to sit on it for a little bit. I waited until August because at that point it was like, who knows when this pandemic's going to be over, and I just didn't want to wait any longer at that point. But it kind of worked out because there were a few people that had said they would do EPs that ended up taking a little bit longer than they said they would. So it kind of worked out because then it just allowed me to kind of get all my ducks in a row. And then so by the time I launched the first one, I actually already had like the first 6 releases all like plotted out and finished. So it was really cool.
Right. So that process of getting the label started, you mentioned working with Chris and him really being instrumental, particularly around distribution and getting
Hmm.
everything going. And then
Yeah.
sounds like the next step from there was figuring out, the visual component. Did you feel like you had a pretty clear vision for how this was gonna all happen? Were you kind of figuring it out as you went? Was Chris really actively involved beyond like the distribution piece?
No, he wasn't really involved beyond that. I mean, he just gave me some advice. He's a great person to go to for advice. But aside from that, no, I mean, I pretty much have done it all on my own. I didn't have like a super clear vision. I mean, really, it was just a lot of like kind of figuring it out as I go. And I mean, I still am figuring it out as I go. There's things where, I just released a sample pack yesterday for Bandcamp Friday. And I really had no idea what to expect. I was thinking like, is this something that's going to sell really well? Is it going to be like, is one person going to buy it? Like I didn't know, and it was somewhere in the middle. I think it was a little below my expectations, but um, better than, one person. So yeah, I'm just kind of always figuring it out as I go. And, the fun of having my own label is like kind of the freedom to do whatever I want. So for example, um, a few months ago it was a Bandcamp Friday. I just woke up that morning. I saw it was Bandcamp Friday. I was like, man, I really should have had something like ready to go for this, and I didn't have anything. And then it kind of just clicked in my head. I was like, I've got a VIP remix of my song "Last Forever" that has, gotten a like really good response from people. I could just throw that up as a free download, and then like if people want to pay something for it, they can. But I'm not expecting anything. It's just free, and I thought it'd be cool to do some new artwork for it because I had it up on my SoundCloud a while ago, but like with really old art that I'm not proud of anymore. I spent a few hours in Photoshop and like knocked out some new art that I thought was really good, put it up on Bandcamp, and I think it's got like over 30 sales. Like people paid for it, and I was like, wow, that was so cool. I wasn't expecting anything for it. I just wanted to have something just to put up. So yeah, people were willing to just pay, and I was willing to take their money.
Yeah. So you mentioned figuring it out as you go.
Definitely.
Has that always been something that you're more comfortable with as opposed to having a really clear path? I just think like that could scare the shit out of a lot of people to be taking on such a bold endeavor. And I'd be curious to understand what that looked like for you, just maybe that self-talk and maybe some challenges along the way. But has that been something that you've always felt more comfortable just kind of getting started? Has it been easy to start things where there isn't a clear path?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's just kind of how my brain works. Like, I have a really hard time seeing like down the line with anything. Like, I'm very much just like I live my life day to day. Planning for something like way, way down the line is just like so hard for me. Like, it's just I'm like, oh God, like I don't even want to think about it. I just want to think about like what I'm doing today and what I've got going on tomorrow, and then I don't want to think about anything else. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how I've always been. Sometimes, to a detriment. Like, there's definitely been times where that's kind of bit me in the ass, but Right now, what I'm doing is just trying to find like a pretty good balance. Like I mentioned, I have a release schedule for the label that's actually filled out till the end of this year. Believe it or not, I've got a separate release schedule for my own music. So I'm trying to do a better job of like keeping track of that stuff. Like there's certain things where I'm like I do want to be a little bit more like rigid about this and have like a really clear plan. But it's always changing too. Like I have to be really adaptable, especially with the label, because there might be, I've got an EP kind of penciled in for a certain month, and then somebody might come back to me and say, hey, I'm getting kind of close to the time when I know you would need the songs, but I'm just not there yet. Like I don't have enough material. Like, what do you want to do? And that's happened. I try to always have a few locked and loaded already, and I'm like, all right, I have to move the release date around, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna move this one up and move this one back down here. You have to be able to kind of just roll with the punches, I've learned, and so these things are kind of always evolving.
Yeah, so you have so much going on, and you talk about going with the flow, taking it one thing at a time. How do you manage all of that? There's just
Yeah,
so much.
yeah.
So how do you prioritize? How do you manage that, including any associated stress, which I can only imagine.
Yeah,
But what
it's
helps you with that?
that's a great question. I'll start by saying that the other day I was going through my release schedule for the year between my label and my music with my wife. I was showing her, and she just looked at me and she said, "Why do you do this to yourself?" So, yeah, it's, I think having it written down really helps me. And I put a lot of stuff in my calendar too. Like if it's not in my calendar, I'm gonna forget it. I have to put like to feed the cats in there every day. So, I have a daily task list, and then I've got like the two release schedules. And between that, I think that covers pretty much everything. So like for example, tomorrow I need to film my portion for a video that we're doing for the Solvent single. And then on Monday, I've got, a few things like I need to work on a collab that somebody sent me. And then I need to uh, like change a different collab. This is another one, like remove a synth part and then like bounce it and send it back to the guy to get his approval. On Tuesday, I need to bounce some stems. And then I've written an ambient album also, which is, that'll be my third album, which sorry to digress here, but it's going to come out probably on my own label in like November. But I need to start bouncing the stems for that so I can start, doing the final mix downs for that. So it's, just having that kind of daily task list. It's like, all right, I know what I'm doing today. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. And, again, it's always kind of changing, right? Like there'll be times when I have maybe 5 tasks in a day and I don't get to all of them. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll just bump them to tomorrow. And then that's going to cause me to bump the next day. And then eventually I'll get caught up somewhere. But yeah, it's a lot to manage. I mean, with the move, especially coming up, like I'm gonna just kind of dial some things back. Like there won't be a Modern Conveniences release in August for that reason. I'm also gonna probably put my Vex 7 alias on hold for a while. I've written an album for that too. I don't know how I've written all these albums, I guess because I've been locked up for a year. But I've written a Vex 7 album also. Um, it's actually mostly techno. There's only a couple of drum and bass songs on it, believe it or not. But that I think I'm just gonna like sit on that until next year and then put that out in 2022. So, kind of like putting some things on hold, spacing some things out, give myself some breathing room, like because I don't want to just be too overwhelmed. But yeah, I mean, it definitely, especially lately, like it's getting a little hairy. There have been times where I'm like, just running around the house, like trying to get stuff done. I'm not just working on music all day, and it's like there's chores that need done. There's work I need to do, and so yeah, sometimes it's like just crazy. I'm like running to the kitchen to get a refill of water, and then run back in here so I can try to get as much done.
And you're incredibly responsive. I mean, all of our
I try to
communication
be.
so far, it's just been very impressive.
Well, thank you. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I totally get it. Everybody's different, but that's one of my absolute biggest pet peeves is when I message somebody and they message me back like 3 days later. So I always try to message people back like just, I'm always at my computer anyways, so it's like I might as well just write you back right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about your workspace. What helps you get through the day? Like what does your workspace include? What are some really key items that help you?
I wish you could see it. All my synthesizers are here at my desk. I've got guitars on this side, and on this side I've got 5 guitars, and then I've got like a pedal set up on the floor. So just kind of having everything like right here at my fingertips when I'm writing music, obviously is great. Uh, I've never really understood, like, there are a lot of musicians that have a studio that's separate from their house, like a physical place that they have to like drive to, and then they're like there during the day, and then they come home. And I guess I can appreciate, that having that separation, it probably helps them kind of like unwind and get out of that headspace of writing music when they're at home. But for me, I'm just like, I want to always have my studio in my home because there's so many times where I'm like in the shower or something, and I think of like a great melody, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta go like, run to the computer and lay that down before I forget it. Maybe that's part of the problem too. I'll forget it if I don't put it down like within a few minutes. But my workspace, I've got this big desk. It's a musician's desk. I don't know if that's what they call it. It's by Output. And they did this desk a few years ago that was specifically designed for musicians. And so it has like a pull-out keyboard tray um, that my Prophet synthesizer's on, and then I've got a bunch of like smaller desktop synths, kind of just like all scattered. You know, I shouldn't say scattered, neatly arranged. They're neatly arranged across the top of it. Um, but yeah, I mean that's kind of my workspace, and then I've got a MacBook Pro hooked up to an external monitor, and I love that. Like, I never want to have a desktop computer again. I love the flexibility of being able to just work wherever. Like, if I go on a trip or something, I take my laptop with me, and then it's the same computer that has all my stuff on it. Because I tried that before, like having a desktop and a laptop, and it's just like I'd want to work on a song on my laptop, but then the files would be on my desktop. It's like, I don't want to go through that.
Right. So let's talk about your work. You have the web design, you have the graphic design, you have, all the music that you're doing. Did you always feel that you wanted to pursue creative work?
From a young age, yeah, I think since I was probably in my teenage years, like, for sure, because I got my first guitar when I was 14, and as soon as I got it, I was just dreaming of being in a band, and like a alternative rock band, because that was what was big at the time. It was like 1994 when I got my first guitar, and Nirvana was on top of the world, so I wanted to be like Kurt Cobain. Minus the suicide, obviously. I just always had aspirations of doing music for a living. And then it just got to a point where it seemed like that probably wasn't really going to happen realistically. I mean, at least not to the point where I could, make my sole income be music. So I think it was around, yeah, 2006. It was like February of 2006 was when I got my first design job. I'd been working in restaurants, and that was fine, but I just kind of felt like I don't want to do that forever. So I just sort of looked at what other marketable skills I have. I didn't go to college, so I was like, I don't have a degree. What else can I do? And I had always made the websites for the various bands that I was in over the years, and so I was always like the web designer guy for the band. So I was like, well, I know how to make websites. Maybe I can do that for a living. Like, people do that, right? So I just started looking on Craigslist, like classified ads, and ended up finding one, and got started doing web design. Yeah, so it's been, I guess, like 15 years now that I've been doing design professionally.
You mentioned not going to college. How did you learn how to make these websites? Was this just something that was self-taught, or
Yeah,
again, you just
100,
figured it out kind of as you went?
yep, 100% self-taught. Yeah, I mean, I started out kind of, it was like a really, really low level job. I was making additions, like updates to an existing website. And so it was really easy. It was mostly just like dragging and dropping files and stuff. And, I was using Dreamweaver, which has like a visual editor. And so I was, anything I had to like change, I was kind of just using the visual editor. I didn't really know very much coding, just some basic stuff. But that pushed me to want to learn more because I was like, man, I want to be able to do more than just these simple tasks, and I want this company to really value me. And right now, I felt like it's just like the most basic stuff was what I was doing, and it was boring too. Um, so I just pushed myself to learn HTML and CSS and a little bit of PHP too. And I would just come home from work every night and then just spend a few hours at my computer after work, like reading tutorials and reading blogs and figuring out how to code. And so by the end of that year, I knew how to code like pretty well. And then I just kept pushing myself because I was like, I want to be like the fucking best at this, basically. And so, not trying to sound full of myself, but then I got like really good. So then when I got my next job, then I was able to get like a higher level role. And then the same thing when I got my third job, then I was able to get like an even higher level role. And then there I was doing like UI design and stuff because I just kept pushing myself to learn more. And I was always trying to figure out like how to make my code as clean as possible because there's a lot of code out there that you can find, like blogs and stuff where they're like, here's how you do this, and it's like big chunk of code, and they're like, just copy and paste it. And I would always look at it and be like, man, I can clean that up, I can make that better, I can trim that down from here down to this. And then so I love giving myself those kinds of fun challenges. So yeah, I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff, and then just like reverse engineering stuff. And then the same thing with Photoshop. Like I would just spend hours like reverse engineering graphics. I would see how somebody did it, and I would be like, oh man, that's such a cool graphic. Like I wonder how they did that. I wonder if I could do it. So I would just like screenshot it, pull it into Photoshop, and then just start seeing if I could recreate it myself from scratch. And then just tutorials. I mean, like there's so many good tutorials out there. There's the PSD Tuts site. That's really like what taught me how to use Photoshop, was that site. Highly recommend that.
What site is this?
PSD Tuts. They say Tuts because they don't want to say Toots, even though it should technically be Toots, right? Because it's a tutorial. But yeah, that site is great. Like there's so many good. I mean, I don't know. Maybe not. It's not as good these days as it used to be. I think just because it's like how many Photoshop tutorials can you really have? If you go way back to the beginning, there's just really good basics. Like I think that's what really helped me, was learning the fundamentals. Now they have these like really crazy tutorials where it's like, here's how to like make a girl riding a dragon over in a volcano and it's exploding and there's like UFOs coming out, and it's like, no, that's way too elaborate. But just learning like basic effects and like textures and like layer styles, and how to do like text effects and things like that. Like that's the stuff that I learned that really kind of set the foundation for what. And then I just kind of took it from there and ran. Once I knew all that foundation, then I was like, all right, now I can just make my own stuff.
And while you were doing all of this work, were you also working on music?
Kind of. I used to be in a band called X Element, and it was kind of like a hybrid, like drum and bass and hard rock, like heavy metal. And I wrote all the songs and was the lead singer and like rhythm guitarist. So I was doing that at the time. It was really hard to juggle that and working full time and teaching myself like coding and design also on top of that. And so we really only did that band for like a year, I think, or maybe 2 years. And then I was just like, I can't keep doing these three things simultaneously. It was just killing me. And like my wife and I had just gotten married and we were moving into a new house, and it was just like way too much on my plate. So for a few years, I was just really focused on work because I really needed to like take my coding and design, to the next level. And so then once I got good enough where I felt like, okay, I don't have to stress about this and I'm not spending a lot of my time after work, like doing tutorials, I can breathe again. That's kind of when I got back into writing music. So that would have been around like 2013. I think that's when I officially started. Akuratyde was 2013, and then my first release was 2015. So it took a couple years before I had like some material that I was really proud of that people were responding to.
And when you weren't actively working on music, was that something that you missed, or you felt like you knew you would definitely be coming back to at some point?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really difficult to step away from. Like it's just so ingrained in who I am, and it's a big part of me. So I mean, I think it was easier at first because I was learning so much new stuff about design and code. Like I was getting really excited about that. And so I was like, oh, I was kind of replacing the joy I get from writing music with the joy of learning all these new things, because I just love learning. Like I'll spend like an hour a day on Wikipedia just reading articles, and it's like I just want to absorb knowledge. My wife jokes that I have a like unquenchable thirst for knowledge. So I think at first it was like, yeah, I was okay with it, but once I got a few years in, it was kind of like, man, I really need to bring the music back.
I definitely appreciate, and the unquenchable thirst for knowledge
Yeah.
strongly resonates with me.
Oh,
I
cool.
can find myself in deep rabbit holes of all the knowledge, sharing in that kind of affinity for all the knowledge. I know for me personally, that's definitely an area that I can get stuck,
Hmm.
particularly around prep. And, I'm just so fascinated by all the things, learning about all the things, how they work. So
Hmm.
has that been a sticking point for you, something you've been able to kind of pull yourself out of and stay productive, or has that ever even been a challenge for you? As
Yeah,
fun as
yeah,
it
no,
is.
it's a challenge, definitely. Yeah, like it's like a daily challenge where, I'll be on my phone in the morning, like trying to get out of bed, and I'll see, some article on Wikipedia that like interests me, and then I click that, and then it leads me to something else, and then that leads me to something else, and then I'll come in here to like start my day, and I'd be like, well, let me finish reading this article really quick. And then like an hour later, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I still reading this? Like, I need to work. So yeah, it's definitely like a daily struggle. There's just so much fascinating stuff out there, and I'm like, I want to know it all.
There's so much. So we talk about, actively pursuing music. You said around 2013 when
Yep.
Akuratyde came about.
Yep.
So would you say there was something specific working on music that was fulfilling for you as opposed to other creative work?
Yeah, I mean, I think music's gonna always be like my first love, my first passion. I get a lot, you know, creatively, like I find doing design work really fulfilling, but it's not as fulfilling as writing music for sure. So when I started it up again in 2013, I was like, I really want to find a way to actually get some stuff out there this time because I had never had any releases. I would write music. I've been writing music since I was 14 years old and never released anything. I mean, part of that was I didn't have the guts to send it out to anybody. I was scared of rejection and I was afraid of how I would feel if people said no. That time, I think, because I had learned a lot from the business world, I had a sort of a different approach. I didn't want to just send it out to a couple people and then if they say no, like, fall into a spiral and be like, oh, nobody wants my stuff. So I just sent it out to like everybody. I think I sent demos to like 30 or 40 different record labels. And one of them was Blue Martin. And, at the time, Chris was like, this isn't really quite the right fit for us, but I dig what you're doing. Like, there's potential here. Keep sending me new stuff. So once I had that, I felt like, okay, now I've got an in, like he's interested enough in what I'm doing that he wants to hear more. So then every time I would finish a new song, I would just send it to him. And eventually we had enough for an EP, which was my first EP on Blue Martin, which was the Embrace EP. So I think having a sort of different mindset about it like really helped me. But I knew when I came back in 2013 that I wanted to like really do it for real this time.
So you talk about the fear of rejection that I think we can all really, relate to. Can you expand on what was helpful to move through that process?
And I think it was just about facing my fears more than anything. There wasn't anything that had happened to me in my life that made it easier to face rejection. I think it was more just feeling like I need to finally do it, like to get over that hump. And so for so many years, I had written music and then just showed my friends and nobody else, and they're like, oh, this is really cool. And it's just sitting on my hard drive for like years. And so I think part of it was I felt a little bit more confident about what I was doing, when I listen back to like my old stuff, I'm like, oh God, it's so bad. Like it's so bad. But having the confidence to send it out, and then when I didn't have the confidence, just kind of, I don't know, I guess like the old adage, fake it till you make it, right? Like there were times when I was like scared out of my mind to send songs to labels to see what they would say. And um, I guess there's a philosophy that I adopted. I say this to everybody to the point where like people are sick of hearing it probably, but I always just say the worst thing that can happen is somebody can say no, right? And like once I realized that, I think I kind of had like a little epiphany where once I realized that, I was like, okay, that's the absolute worst thing that can happen. Nobody's gonna like get my demo and be like, oh fuck this guy, like I'm gonna trash his name all over town, I'll make sure that he never gets signed. Like no one's gonna do that. They're just gonna say like, sorry mate, this isn't the right fit for us. And it's like that's the worst thing that can happen, then that's really not that bad. And once I realized that, it made it a lot easier to kind of just let go and like send stuff out there.
And so I'm curious to hear what has helped you that you found also to be helpful advice, maybe with the artists on your label. Maybe they're experiencing challenges that you've experienced and you're able to
Hmm.
to help them in some regard. Is there anything in addition to that you've found to be particularly helpful advice in moving through those challenges?
That's a really good question. I do think having a label does sort of often put me in sort of like a mentorship role. Even if it's an artist that's arguably, much more well known and established than I am, there's certain things where it's sort of like I'm the one kind of guiding the process. I'm the one taking the demos and then, choosing the song order, doing the artwork, like figuring out the release date. And in that process, there's just sometimes challenges. So sometimes I'm the one kind of just like talking them through like what's going on, or even not anything to do with my label, but just we're chatting and they're talking to me about experiences that they've had. And so um, I don't know, I tend to give a lot of unsolicited advice, is what people say. So sometimes maybe they don't want it, but I always try to be thoughtful about my advice.
I'd be curious to kind of circle back to what we were, we were talking about your label earlier, and
Hmm.
the reasoning for choosing the name Modern Conveniences, and
Hmm.
you talk about, taking technology for granted. And so I'd be curious if you could kind of share an example or a time in your life where that's been particularly memorable, or where that's had maybe a bigger impact.
As far as the taking it for granted thing, sort of the simple answer would be like, I carry this phone around in my pocket every day and it can do like all these incredible things. And 15 years ago, this technology didn't even exist. And now I'm just like, whatever, it's a phone. But maybe like a better answer would be my dad died when I was 20 years old, and I don't have any videos of him. And I have very few digital photos of him. I have, old photo books that I could like take the photos out and scan them, and I have done that. But like, I don't have any recordings of him. I don't have any voicemails with his voice that I can listen to if I'm missing him. I don't have like a lot of these things that, like if I were to lose my mom now, obviously I hope that doesn't happen anytime soon, but if something were to happen to my mom, I've got all these memories. I've got, folders filled of like photos and videos of us together, every time she flies out here to visit. And it just kind of struck me one day, like I was thinking about that, and I was just thinking like I don't have any videos of my dad. I don't have like, anything where I could like hear his voice. I don't even know what it sounds like, really. I mean, I have an idea in my head of what I think it sounds like, but there isn't anything where I could go back and really like hold on to of a memory. Um, and so I think that's kind of part of what got me started thinking about this name and this idea. It was just like, how fleeting are these things, right? Like something you take it for granted, and then one day it's gone, and then you're like, oh man, like I don't even have any videos of this. So, just thinking about that, and then sort of around the same time that I was in that headspace, I was also on like a deep dive wormhole of looking at photos on Pinterest from like 1960s airports and hotels and stuff, where it's just like, that super mid-century style of design, which I absolutely love. So I was thinking about like that stuff, that aesthetic, that like 1960s aesthetic. And I was thinking like, man, at the time, they thought that shit was like from the future. Like they were like, this is the most futuristic stuff that anyone's ever going to do. And it was like, now it's so dated. And, I mean, a lot of it looks really good still, especially like the furniture and stuff I really like. But some of it's like really like, wow, it's not good. And so I was just thinking about that. And I was thinking like, if those people who at the time thought that that was like the most futuristic stuff, if they could see what we have now, like it would blow their minds. It would be like, oh my God, like a computer in 1960s, like the size of a room, and then you guys have them in your pockets and you carry them around and like it can do everything.
Right. And yeah, I can imagine, that being quite a turning point in your life, with your dad, and you mentioned, not taking things for granted. And so in what ways, just to dig into, an example or two, does that, play out in your life now?
You know, just spending time with people, I think is like the biggest thing. And, that's obviously been especially hard this year. I haven't seen any of my family members for over a year because none of them live in California, and it just feels too risky. So, but that's the biggest thing about not taking that stuff for granted for me is just spending time. Like, when my wife and I are hanging out on the weekends, like we always try to do something really fun together and make sure that like we're having some quality time together. And when family members come to visit or we go to visit them, we try to really like soak up that time and make sure that we do something kind of meaningful and we're not just like all sitting around watching TV together. We went to Texas to see my father-in-law and Bethany's stepmother. Her dad and her stepmother went to Texas to see them for Thanksgiving at the end of 2019. And then we went to Vegas with my family for Christmas in 2019. So it was like kind of back to back. And at the time, it was really stressful because we were also we're moving here. And so it was like we did the Thanksgiving trip, then we're like packing, and then we did the Vegas trip, and then we come back and moved like the week after that. And it was like so crazy. And we were kind of like, do we even want to do this? Like, do we want to do both these trips? But we were like, yeah, we definitely do because, we might not get to see them again for a while, which ironically, like now it's like, wow, we really haven't seen them for over a year. We were thinking at the time, like we might not get to see them for like 6 or 9 months. Um, and now it's like, who knows, when we'll get to see them again, maybe in June or July or something. So it'll have been like almost 2 years. Um, so yeah, we're really glad we did that and just doing that kind of stuff, like making sure that you see the people that you love, even if you're not close with your family, it could just be like spending quality time with your friends, but spending time with people that you care about and making sure you're doing something of quality, and it's not just like everybody's sitting around on their phones.
Right. One thing that, kind of along the lines of that, that I try to bring myself back to frequently is like, we never know when the last time for something is going to be, like
Yeah,
nothing really is guaranteed. And so
right.
to have the intention of trying to savor every moment, including the mundane, especially the mundane,
Yeah,
um, because if this is the last time we ever go to the grocery store, if we had known that, maybe that experience is a little different, and we don't actually have to know that. We can just imagine, and maybe that brings a little more. Maybe that changes the experience.
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, tomorrow is not promised. I mean, you can't obsess over it to the point where you're like, oh my God, I gotta like soak up as much time as possible. Um, but something in between the two, you got to find like that middle ground of making sure that you're making like good memories with people and good memories for yourself. It doesn't even have to be with anybody else necessarily, but just that you're doing something for yourself where you can have those memories.
It's a great thing to remind ourselves of, definitely. So you made some incredible music and then you have the collabs. Is there a track or two that, come to mind that you have a particularly strong connection to?
Yeah, definitely. Letting Go, the last song off of my album Past Lives, that one for sure, because it sort of like ties up the whole theme of the album, which is about like grief and loss. And it's, the title might be kind of on the nose, but it's literally about like letting go of that stuff, like trying to move on and be in a better place where you can think about those people and not feel like you're going to cry every time that you think about them. There's one on my new album called Disquiet, which kind of means like anxiety is sort of like the definition of that word. And the reason I titled it that is because the song itself is kind of like chaotic, but what I was feeling when I wrote it was sort of like a chaotic feeling of emotions, like just feeling overwhelmed and stressed and emotional. And I kind of just channeled that all into this song. It usually takes me a really long time to write songs. Like it usually takes me like a month to finish a song. But I think I wrote that one in like 3 days. And so I felt it so like encapsulated what I was feeling in that moment. Because, when you're trying to like write a song based on a feeling, if it takes a month to write it, sometimes it's hard to hold on to that feeling, for a month, and it's hard to get it back in that headspace. And you're like, okay, I know what the song's supposed to be about, but I'm in a great mood today. I like, how am I to write this like sad song or whatever? Uh, so Disquiet for me is one. It's like I think it's very like powerful emotionally, but it also is very personal because it kind of encapsulates like exactly how I was feeling at the time that I wrote it. So I probably should have talked about like one of my happier songs. All I did was talk about like the melancholy and sad ones.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Lost Summer from my first album. That's a good one. I wrote that song kind of like I started going to raves in 1997, and that's actually how I discovered drum and bass, although at the time everybody called it jungle. So I wanted to write something that kind of made me feel like how I used to feel out on the dance floor. Big drop comes in, everybody's like, oh, and I didn't necessarily want to like make it sound exactly like all those old records sounded, but more about something that would make me feel like how I felt when I heard those songs, And so it's sort of like it is a jungle track, but it's not like super accurate to the music from that time period, but it's more just like kind of for me recreates that feeling of being on the dance floor when I was, 16 years old or whatever, and hearing like a really dope track that I'd never heard before and everybody like losing their minds because it was cool and just that feeling of like euphoria basically.
So 97, you go
I
to your
know I'm
first rave?
old. Yeah, it was my 16th birthday party.
Your 16th birthday party. So is this the first time that you're hearing jungle?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time I was hearing like all forms of rave music, really. I mean, like the only rave music that I had heard before that was The Prodigy, and by that point, like they were doing, Firestarter and stuff, which wasn't even really rave music anymore at that point. So yeah, like I hadn't really heard like even house or techno, not like real house. I mean, I'd heard like stuff, on commercials on TV, but like not real house and techno. So yeah, that was just my exposure to everything. Like, my friends had heard about it and we thought it sounded really cool and we can stay out all night. And somehow my parents agreed to it. I don't know. I think they were just probably didn't know what it was, and they were just like, "Ah, this sounds fun. It's like an all night dance party." But yeah, that was my exposure. And actually, I hated jungle when I first heard it, like because I think it was just so different than anything I'd ever heard before, and it was so fast and like, especially at the time, the focus was really on doing like a lot of like chopped up breaks and like a lot of drum edits and stuff, and I couldn't follow the beat. Like it just didn't make sense to me, and I was just like, what is this? Like it's so weird. It's like all like just chopped up, and I was like, what the hell is this music? So for like the first 6 months, and we started going to raves every weekend. So I mean, a lot of times two in the same weekend. If there was one on Friday and one on Saturday, we'd try to hit them both. So I got really like integrated into the rave scene like pretty quickly. So it didn't take too long, but I think it's only about like 6 months before I started to like jungle, and it just kind of gradually won me over. It was actually Doc Scott's track Shadowboxing. That was the first song that I heard where I was like, okay, I could get into this. This is cool. And then also the Groove Rider remix of Share the Fall by Ronnie Size. I really like, because I was into like really dark stuff at the time. I mostly just listened to industrial music, and so like those songs are both pretty kind of like dark and aggressive. And once I heard that, I was, because mostly I was hearing like kind of happy jungle stuff. Once I heard like the darker stuff, I was like, okay, I could get into this.
Sick. And so the group of friends that you went with to that first rave, were they already in that scene?
No, none of us had ever been to a rave before. It was all like our first exposure to it. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like we were all just like, wow, this is a whole world that we did not know existed. It's so interesting, and like kind of learning the code. Like learning about Plur and stuff like that. Like it was really cool. Yeah, it just opened my eyes to so much.
Oh, yeah. And was this back in Ohio?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't move to California until 2010. So yeah, all my raving days were in Ohio. There was actually like a really big rave scene there. I think probably because there isn't a lot else to do. But like they would get big people come through there for sure. Like I've seen a lot of big acts come through there. So yeah, it was all in Ohio.
Sick. So it takes you 6 months to really like get a feel for jungle. And then at that point, are you like,
Oh, I was hooked. Yeah, like that's all I wanted to listen to after that. Yeah, like I spent 6 months listening to house and techno, and I was really into it. And then it was like, I don't know, like a switch in my brain flipped or something. It was like a light bulb went off. And then as soon as I really got into jungle, like I was all in. And then I started writing it. Like by the end of that year, I was writing drum and bass on my like shitty little setup that I had. I had just like a drum machine and a synthesizer, and started writing it. And it was terrible, but I was so excited because I was like, oh, I'm writing this music. And then like I would tell everybody about it. Everybody I would meet. I'd be like, do you listen to jungle? And nobody knew what I was talking about. Of course, they were like, what do you mean? Like jungle? What is that? And but yeah, I mean, I was just like, I don't know, what is it, right? Like, what is it about drum and bass that's like where we like this weird music that half people in the world have never even heard of, and it's just something about it. It's like so addicting. I don't know.
that's still a working theory for me, but I do feel like there is some kind of seed in some group of people that it's just once like it's fed with that sound, then it's just it needs a little bit of time to kind of fertilize, and then it's just like this is a no-brainer. Like this is it. I'm hooked for life.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. I mean, I've been listening to drum and bass for 23 years, and I've been writing drum and bass for 23 years, pretty much. And it's just like I don't know what it is, but I still love it. I love it just as much now as the first time. Well, not the first time I heard it because I didn't like it at first, but the first time that I heard a song I liked, um, I still like it just as much now. Yeah, it's wild.
Beautiful. Well, I'm super grateful to be, on the receiving end of all of your work and all of your love and
Oh,
passion
thank you,
for
thank
this
you.
music because, I get to reap the benefits along with so many other people and, you know, just bring so much joy to my life and you're bringing just spreading just good vibes all around. So,
Well, I appreciate that.
yes,
That really means a lot to me to hear you say that. It means a lot, and I want you to know that. Thank you.
it comes from the heart, man. It comes from the heart. So to many, many more years of making this amazing music that you make.
Absolutely.
How about we jump into some rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right, first one. I think I know the answer to this one, but cats or dogs?
Cats all the way. I have two.
Cats all the way. What's one album that you'd recommend everyone listen to?
The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails.
No hesitation.
Nope, that's my favorite album of all time.
If you had 25 hours a day, what would you do with the extra time?
Probably like watch more production tutorials on YouTube and like try to get better at mixing and mastering.
Love it. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or to be able to talk to animals?
Oof, that's a good question. I think talk to animals because I'd be probably more interested in what they have to say than most people.
If you were guaranteed the correct answer to one question, what would you ask?
Ah, are UFOs real?
Are UFOs real? Favorite item under $100?
Favorite item under $100?
You want to do favorite item under 10?
Yeah, 20 ounce of Coke Zero.
20 ounce of Coke Zero. Love
Yeah,
it.
that's my jam.
Yeah. Is that your favorite beverage as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a full-blown addiction.
If you could suddenly possess any talent, what would it be?
Good question. Be able to sing, like better.
Be able to sing.
Yeah, I'm not a very good singer.
If you could make a documentary about anything, what would it be?
I don't know. There's so many that have already been done. My wife and I went on like a big documentary kick a few years ago, and we watched like so many, and so I feel like they've all been done already. How about like a really good documentary about jungle and drum and bass music, like the history of them? Because there have been a few recently, but they were very like um, polarizing, where a lot of people felt like they were good, and a lot of people felt like they were not good. So maybe one that everybody could like.
I'm into it.
Okay, cool.
All right, last one. What makes you smile?
Oh man, so many things. First and foremost, my wife and my cats, music, uh, TV. I watch a lot of comedies. I'm big into comedies. That and like stand up. I watch a lot of stand up. So stand up comedians and just life stuff. Like when something happens in life that you just have to smile and you're like, man, that was cool. Somebody pays you a compliment. Somebody like you reaches out and says, hey, I want to interview you about your music. I mean, that put a pretty big smile on my face. So, yeah, stuff like that.
Well, that puts a big fat smile on my face as well. So
All
thank you
right.
for that. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm so grateful to have you be a part of this.
Oh, I'm glad to
This
do
has
it.
been amazing. Thank you, man. This has been amazing chatting with you. Where should people go to follow you?
Hit me up on social media. I'm on pretty much everything. It's always just /Akuratyde. I also have a website, akuratyde.com. I've got, some side projects. Just hit me up on Instagram. That's probably where I spend the most time.
We'll be including all of those links in the description. Highly recommend everyone check out what you're doing with Modern Conveniences, with Akuratyde, with 3VS, with Monica, doing a ton of cool stuff. So before we bring this to a close, anything else that you want to add? Any parting comments, requests for those watching?
I don't think so. If people want to search my music out and see if they like it, that's cool. If they don't, that's fine too. I guess if you've made it this far in the interview and you haven't ever heard my music, you should probably check it out. But if you don't, that's fine with me.
I'm going to say you should definitely,
I
definitely
don't,
check it
I don't
out.
want to pressure. I don't want to pressure anybody. I don't want them to feel
All
pressured.
pressure.
Okay, that's fine. You can
All
do it. It's your
pressure.
show. I'll let you do it because it's your show.
Well, thanks again, man. And
Yeah.
thank you to everyone who's listening. So happy to have you here.
Oh,
So,
thank you. Thank you for
yeah,
having
until
me.
next time.
Peace.